James Landale, current diplomatic correspondent of the BBC and former Bristol student who founded Epigram, Bristol student newspaper, returned to Bristol for only the second time to reflect on his career path as a journalist, offer some inspiring careers advice, and impart his hopes for journalism in the future. So I'm here with James after the talk, and of course we touched on the transformation of journalism and also that kind of added impact of AI. So given all the changes that have happened, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self if you were about to start a career in journalism now?
I would say go for it, because there is still a huge job of journalism that needs to be done, that even though the technology is changing and will provide new opportunities and new challenges, the job of journalism is still there. The world is still full of stories that need to be told, and there is an audience for trusted information in a world where there is an awful lot of information that is low quality. So I think my advice would be go for it, seize all the opportunities, use all the technology that is available that wasn't available to me then, and enjoy it.
We had there was a British vlogger who caught the Nepalese revolution on his phone, and that gained, I'd say, more traction than most news outlets do these days. You had a quite, I'd say, traditional career path. You got a high first, you got a master's, you went on to get a post-grad degree. Do you think that people should change the way that they view stepping into this industry?
Look, I think clearly any journalist that's got a bit of training, that's got a bit of experience, that's always going to stand them in good stead. Whether or not they form, they go through a traditional route into a mainstream media organisation, or whether they branch out and they say, right, I'm going to base myself in Kathmandu and I'm going to write about what's going on in Nepal. And you know what? If I get lucky, because there's a big news story on my patch and I'm the only person there, all credit to them. And certainly that route of placing yourself in the middle of nowhere, in a place where there aren't that many journalists, and then suddenly news breaking there, is a very, very traditional route of getting into, certainly being a foreign correspondent. You'll find a lot of people who are currently working as correspondents overseas began life working in, an obscure part of West Africa, that suddenly became newsworthy, and they got their break because they were noticed, and they got their copy in a mainstream media organisation, a newspaper, and said, right, okay, that person's rather good, we'll nab them. And then suddenly they moved to another part of Africa, or then their career expands. So, do I think you should never do any training or never be part of a mainstream news organisation and simply rely on your mobile phone and vlogging? I would say, all good luck to the vlogger, but I think a bit of training and a bit of structure will always help.
Can I ask what your proudest achievements are, and then also your biggest regrets in your career?
I think my proudest achievement is, I could choose various stories or scoops and things, but I think my proudest achievement is probably just surviving this long, and also I hope being trusted. I think having a sense that actually what I say is reliable and with a reasonable amount of experience and knowledge and judgment, so that if people think they want to listen to what I'm going to say on air, then if that's what people think, then I'd be proud of that. In terms of my biggest regret, I would say probably I probably spent too much time at Westminster. I think that Westminster, I spent 20 years of my life covering politics on and off. And although I did a lot of international politics as part of that, covering politicians going around the world, different wars and conflicts and things, I probably spent a little bit too long following the intricacies of Westminster, and I should have broken out a bit earlier.
Is that because you wanted to explore news more globally than just...
Yes, absolutely. I found some politics of Westminster a little bit introspective, and I wanted to sort of broaden my palette.
Yeah, no, there's definitely more to discover. And I want to comment on developing skills. I mean, when you come from university and you start off in a career in journalism, you don't actually have any concept of the real world. How do you battle imposter syndrome when it comes to that?
Yeah, look, you're always going to be, when you're starting out, you're always going to be sitting there thinking, can I do this? But 9 times out of 10, if you're already got a foot in the door and you probably, it's probably the case you can. I can tell very quickly when I meet somebody whether or not they've got the ability and ambition to be a journalist, because of just the nature of who they are and what they feel. Do they have that something about them? Because there are some people who are in the trade, and I'm sitting there thinking, why are you a journalist? Because they seem uncurious about the world, and there are some people who just think, yeah, I can imagine you being in a newsroom anywhere. Do you feel imposter syndrome? I think everybody feels a bit of that at times, thinking, crikey, why am I doing this? I constantly want to make sure that I know as much as I possibly can about a story, so that I don't say something daft about it. Because by definition, an awful lot of journalism, you're operating in a space of minimal information. It can be, you're just sent somewhere, this crime's happened, go there. You've never been to that part of the world before, and literally you're not an expert in it, and you've got to go in there and, as a journalist, ask questions, become an expert as quickly as possible, because that is the job. But equally, when you're interviewing somebody who knows their subject, you've got to know that subject too. And so there's always an element of, do I know enough? Does this person know more than me? Yes, they do. Does that mean they're going to catch me out and make it hard for me to ask the questions that I should be asking on behalf of my readers and audience?
And I'm sure that's something that develops with experience. Or do you still find yourself being caught out?
Sometimes you get that it's an irrational nervousness where you're standing in front of a camera and you know that in 60 seconds that little hole is going to open up, the little aperture, and 4 million people are going to be looking down it. And you're going, 4 million people, that's a lot of people. And it's a sort of an irrational thing. And you just push that thought to one side and focus on what you want to say and hope that you don't trip over your words.
Do you think your time at Bristol University shaped your experience as a journalist today?
Yes, I think it did, because I was incredibly lucky. I was here at a time when the politics department was quite small. It was a very close band of students and lecturers. And what it did is it gave me something that I think not every student has, and that is the freedom to think and debate and speak in a way that you are without responsibility. And I don't think everybody, even then, went through their university careers getting that. Some people, they just did their syllabus and got their degree. But we would have seminars that were nothing to do with the syllabus, that were from visiting speakers who come from other universities, and they'd talk about some subject that was just sort of interesting. And then we would have a seminar in a formal context, but then we would go to the pub afterwards and we'd have a few pints and talk nonsense about truth, beauty and justice and these kind of things, in a way that, if it was recorded, thank heavens it's not, it would sound probably pompous and slightly portentous. But that is, I think, a core part of one's intellectual development, of that ability to be able just to think and say stuff without fear of, people jumping. Yes, you're going to have challenge and disagreement and have argument, fine. But it allows you to open an intellectual door.
Yeah.
And that's what I did at Bristol, and that's what I'm eternally grateful to the university for, and that particular department at that particular time, and the individuals involved in it, who gave us that freedom to do that, because I think that was a real privilege.
Is it a worry for you then, as it is with so many of the generation above, that my generation is losing the ability to critically think?
Is that true?
I don't believe it is. But also, I do history and we do specialise in critical analysis. But I think there is just a massive dialogue. My friends and myself are doing various bits of work experience, and I'm asked by all these older people who are much more important than I am, do you still drink, or do you still have these discussions, or is it too woke to say that? I mean, the whole wokeism thing, I think it's been blown massively out of proportion, and it's looked down on instead of added to the debate that I think my generation actually has.
Yeah. Well, look, each generation has its own debate and framework for it. And I think as long as people are free to speak and say what they want without fear or favour, that should be it. Because if you cannot have that freedom at university, you won't have it anywhere. Because once you're in an employed environment, there are constraints on what you can say and do. Because offices have rules, you have duties and responsibilities as an employee, and I think that at university it should be allowing people to blossom and flourish and think widely, and I hope as many students as possible get that opportunity.
Absolutely, and I think that links quite nicely back to the George Orwell quote, in essence, as well.
Yeah. I mean, that, it's a radical quote. Liberty meaning, the freedom to say what others do not wish to hear. What I think is the great thing about university should be the willingness and ability to disagree with each other, but then go to the pub afterwards. In other words, that disagreement shouldn't be so fundamental that we see it as part of our core identities. Just, we have a different opinion about something, we agree to differ, and then let's go to the pub and have a nice time. And I think that sense of learning to disagree is something that I think it's not just for universities, I think it's for society at large. I think I think it's a skill that perhaps we could focus on a bit more.
Absolutely agree. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Really interesting.
Thank you.